Beyonce with Texas Hold'em. Welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint program here on your colour of Country Life, Flow FM, to the state of finances in South Australia. And we're looking at a response to the budget that has been delivered by the South Australian Business Chamber. And to tell us more about it is Andrew Kay, the Chief Executive of the South Australian Business Chamber. Andrew, great to be with you. How are you?
Good, thanks, Ellis.
Take us back to the sentiment of your response to the budget and the disappointment that you expressed. Specifically, what would be the roadmap forward if it was up to you and your peak body?
Yeah, look, we were disappointed because the federal government came out with their budget a few weeks back and there was nothing in that for business. And we felt that we've got a government here who are looking at a surplus. In fact, they're looking at a surplus for the next 3 years. And there's an opportunity to give some of that money back to business because the surplus is coming from taxes, it's coming from GST, it's coming from payroll tax, it's coming from gambling tax. Now, we saw an opportunity for some reform around payroll tax in South Australia. We weren't suggesting the government abolishes it, even though every business owner would love that to be the case. But the reality is payroll tax is embedded into government's financial models now. It's not going to be pulled out, but there are ways to address some of the pain. And most immediately, I guess the bluntest instrument would be to change the threshold for payroll tax because it hasn't been moved for 5 years. And in that time, we've had significant increase in wages. So businesses who used to sit with their wages bill below the payroll tax threshold and didn't have to pay payroll tax are now finding themselves tipped into that payroll tax category, not because they've employed more people, but simply because their wage bill has grown as wages have grown. And if you really want to see businesses be innovative and be more productive, they need to be in a position where they can invest more in their businesses and in their people. And if they're going to be taxed every time they bring a new person into the business, well, they're just not going to grow. Payroll tax for us, we gave the government a suite of 6 reforms they could look at to try and address some of the pain businesses are feeling around payroll tax. And unfortunately, they didn't pick up on them. But in a payroll tax, this conversation's a marathon, not a sprint, and we've got budgets ahead of us in the coming years as we head towards an election where maybe there'll be more interest in having that conversation. And especially for regional businesses, we know that in other states, Victoria, for example, they offer a discount for regional centres on their payroll tax. If you're in Victoria and you're classified regional, you pay about a quarter of the payroll tax that a metro business does. So we suggested to the government they look at a 50% discount for regional businesses to encourage business to set up here in South Australia rather than to take the discount and set up over the border.
Andrew Kay, Chief Executive of the South Australian Business Chamber, telling us all about the fact that the South Australian government has, in his view, delivered a safe state budget that fails to address the pressing needs of the business community. We'll explore this a little more in a few short moments' time by keeping Andrew Kay on the line. But up next, let's take a look at historical Australian anniversaries to have taken place on this day, the 12th of June, in the history of our nation. We'll see you back here shortly. Hudson with Gonna Find Out. And welcome back. It is the third hour of the Country Viewpoint on Flow FM. Well, we're finding out all about the state of business in South Australia right now with Andrew Kay, the Chief Executive of the South Australian Business Chamber. Let's take a look at the budget announcement from last week. You yourself expressed your disappointment in the budget announcement, and you said that you believe it offered little tangible support amidst the ongoing cost of doing business crisis in South Australia. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, I myself, just as someone who's not overly invested in this on a day-to-day basis, I'm noticing how many eateries are shutting up shop in South Australia. That's just one sector, of course. Fill us in on the background to this.
Yeah, certainly we're seeing in hospitality, many cafes and small restaurants are closing down. Look, there are some who are closing down purely because the cost of running that business is becoming onerous for them. There are others who, might have been in the caper for some period of time and have decided to retire rather than push on because it's a bit too tough. But we talk to businesses all over the state, and the clear message the last 12 to 18 months has been these businesses are seeing electricity bills higher than they've ever seen in their time in business. Some of them have increased 20 to 30% year on year, and I think most people could have seen that in their own power bills in some cases. Their insurance premiums are higher than they've ever been, and similar increases, 30 to 40% in some cases on insurance premiums. Their wage bills have gone up because wages have been increased through the awards over the last few years in an inflationary period. And then you've just put down the simple fact that because we have been going through these inflationary times, all their costs of goods and inputs they're bringing to their businesses are costing them more as well. So all those costs and inputs are heading north. But while that's been happening, you're seeing the economy slow down because there's been higher interest rates. And it was the goal of the Reserve Bank to take the heat out of the economy, and that's been happening. So when you've got demand slowing but costs heading up, not every business can withstand that sort of pressure, and that's why we're seeing a number of them fold right now.
When we look at a number of small businesses and indeed the struggling hospitality industry, I'm sure the government will point to population increases being the immediate fix. Is it perhaps too much of a short-term view though?
I think right now what we're seeing is the impact of an extended period of high interest rates in the economy slowing demand, coupled with these costs, bringing, there's a role for population, no doubt, more about getting a skilled workforce up and running, because what we're looking at is a raft of significant infrastructure projects the state has ahead of them over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And there's the renewables project, there's hospitals, there's roads, there's AUKUS, submarine. There's a lot of projects that are going to require a skilled workforce. And right now the challenge is how do we get those people ready and up and running to deliver on those projects, because that's probably one of the biggest risks the government faces with all those projects is finding the workers to do them. And that's where increasing the population will play a role. Flip side of that is we have a housing shortage in South Australia at the moment. So as does the rest of the country, it's not specific to us. So you can't really have a conversation around population and jobs and skills without talking about the need for housing as well.
Is there any other red tape that's bogging people down that isn't really spoken of a lot in mainstream media circles?
Look, I think right now when I speak to business owners, they're telling me the cost of, bureaucracy and red tape, regulations, call it what you will, has never been greater. And I speak to a business owner in Port Lincoln and they say, we're now spending a day a week on basically red tape, which I wasn't doing 2 years ago in my business. And when I say, where's that coming from? They'll say it's a combination of federal government, state government, and even local government regulations that have been faced with. There's a raft of industrial relations changes. In fact, the most significant industrial relations reform that we've seen in decades that have been rolled out in 3 separate tranches by the federal government, and businesses are just trying to wrap their heads around what that means for them. In fact, we've been running education sessions around the regions. We've been to Port Lincoln, we've been to Whyalla, Port Pirie, Riverland in Renmark, and also Mount Gambier so far, and there's more to come, just to help businesses understand the significance of these industrial relations changes, because they're really complex, and while you don't need to be an expert on all of them, you at least need to know where you can turn to for help. And that's one of the services the South Australian Business Chamber offers, is that people can call our business advice hotline and get information around these industrial relations changes and how they affect their business.
South Australian Business Chamber Chief Executive Andrew Kay, really do appreciate your time and your views here on this program. All the best with everything going forward.
Thanks, Ellis. You're very welcome. Bye now.
Andrew Kay rounding out today's show. We'll tie it all together right after this.